Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. Thanks for joining us. As we always do, we cover very important topics that affect our community. One of those topics, and it's a topic that's on everyone's lips for the last 2, 3 decades, even longer, is the one of housing or affordable housing or the lack of housing. We do know that in most of our communities, there's been a massive backlog with regards to people accessing or accessible to government affordable housing as well. In studio, we have an organization called Development Action Group that's been playing a very big role in creating an awareness and assisting our communities to try and solve some of the housing issues. We'd like to welcome Sister Querida Saal. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. It's a topic that everybody speaks about. Closer to the elections time, that's when you start hearing a lot more, either from politicians and from the communities. And it's always questions that people tend to ask politicians. What are you going to do about the housing issue? So give us a broader perspective on where we are right now on the housing issue.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that when we think about housing, we have to consider our past. Currently, to put it bluntly, we're in a crisis. We have a housing crisis, and it covers or it impacts every single part of the country. It is exceptionally difficult for communities, particularly previously disadvantaged communities, to access affordable housing. And that is for a range of reasons, most notably or prominently because we're simply not delivering affordable housing at scale on the part of government and also on the part of the private sector. So I think, in short, that's where we're at, and there's a desperate need for some serious action on all levels, urgency in terms of addressing this crisis.
Because let's face it, to a large degree, our system or our grid has been affected because people have illegally used the grid to accommodate themselves. For example, informal settlements that have come up, and we do know that because there's a housing crisis, that informal settlements are the result of that, which exacerbate our grid to a point. But in your research, in your organization, what do you feel are some of the causes that contribute to this crisis?
Yeah, just to reiterate, it's exactly as you say. The outcome of a shortage of affordable housing is the proliferation of informal settlements and a severe increase in unlawful occupations. And to go back to your question, part of what we believe is that we have to put people at the center of this work. And we have to ensure that we equip our communities and put them in the place where they can advocate for housing rights themselves. But it also means that we have to engage with government so that we ensure that whatever solutions, whatever response there is, even the private sector, not only government, but specifically government, whatever response we give to this housing challenge, it speaks directly to the needs of people on the ground.
Yes.
The solutions are perhaps not always tailor-made, but it is done with the people that are going to benefit in mind and what the specific issues are at different levels that impact a person's ability to access housing, and how you then devise policy, strategy, budgets, even and plans to specifically speak to those challenges, but also in a way that is practical, implementable, pragmatic, and all of that.
Yeah. What is your involvement as an organization? What is your involvement with communities and government at this time?
So with communities, we do a lot of capacity building. So that's trying to equip people in terms of what the National Housing Code looks like, for instance, what qualification criteria exist, to equip people on what the vision for the country is in terms of housing policy. For instance, if you think about the draft white paper that was released by national government late last year, there's a specific vision that underpins every single policy that or every single program, that is included in the National Housing Code. So it's important for our communities to understand that, but also to have a very, very clear understanding of what each of those responses look like, what they can expect from government and what they cannot expect.
Okay.
So in terms of the work that we do, part of that is working with our community partners, capacitating them to understand the laws, policies, plans that guide housing delivery, but also then to engage with those implementing these policies in a way that is constructive, in a way that puts on the table what possible solutions they are, and how we then collectively collaborate to address those issues.
So speaking about solutions, is there a way forward? Is there a reprieve for the crisis that we face ourselves in?
Absolutely, I think so. We have some very critical solutions that we can think about even now. So as an example, something we've been working on for quite some time is the idea around the release of public land, well-located land for the purposes of building affordable housing. Land, especially in a city like Cape Town, is, for instance, exceptionally expensive, it's costly.
But do you find to a large degree that the city of Cape Town tends to find land that is quite remote and maybe which then results in people taking transport from half an hour away from the CBD, where a large amount of their income still is, comes from the CBD?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's Cape Town especially, but across the board, one of the issues with what we know as the RDP type housing, or now BNG housing, is the fact that it tends to be located on the outskirts of the city, far-flung areas, which means that we're creating dormitory towns where people have to spend a lot of money traveling from where they're living to be able to access work opportunities in more well-located areas or in the inner cities. That's a challenge we have to address in Cape Town especially, but also I think in other parts of the country. When we're talking or thinking about spatial justice, addressing the segregation of the past, we have to be very, very critical. We have to focus our attention on not only providing housing to people and placing an additional burden on them in terms of what they have to spend on transport, but we also have to think about what our cities looks like when it's more inclusive, when anybody, regardless of your income, I mean, I think that's always probably going to have some sort of impact, but to the extent where we create affordable opportunities in mixed market type housing, for instance, where people with different ranges of income are able to access a housing opportunity in a well-located area where they have access to jobs, amenities like schools, hospitals, the rest, and where they're not spending an inordinate amount of their income on transport.
Yeah. You mentioned corporate sector that also needs to engage and assist to alleviate the housing crisis. Expand on that for us.
So there are many ways in which the private sector can contribute. One example, and something that we've been advocating for quite seriously, is around inclusionary housing. That's where a proportion of a housing development is made available at affordable rates for rentals or for home ownership. And where an overlay zone, for instance, may be created in that space. So that means that when the necessary policies are put in place and where developers then are granted incentives to make available that type of housing, we urge them to make use of that. We urge them to join government, communities, everybody else to participate in this spatial justice agenda, so that they, even though you are looking to benefit as a developer in terms of profit, you're also contributing to the national agenda in terms of providing affordable housing for people who may not necessarily be able to access a house in a particular area because of its cost.
Should our communities find themselves in a position where they would need advice, assistance with any of their challenges, could they reach out to your organization?
Absolutely. We are on all of social media networks. You can go to our website, www.dag.org.za, and our offices are in Observatory, Cape Town. Welcome to
Fantastic.
pop in.
Are you nationally based as well? Do you have branches in other parts of the country?
Not at the moment. We work in other parts of the
I
country,
see.
but not necessarily branches.
Fantastic. Querida Saal, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for all that you do for our communities, but also for enlightening us about our housing crisis, because I think a lot more people need to be educated, need to be aware, and need to be assisted as well. So all the very best to you and your organization.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that's Querida Saal, who is part of Development Action Group. I hope this interview was very informative to you. If you have any questions, they are on all the good social media platforms. That's all that we have for you. We are back tomorrow and Monday, but don't forget, it's the Quran competition that's happening this Saturday in Lenasia. The Cape Town team will be up there, and I just want to say thank you to my colleagues, Sohail Barnes, Mohammed Parker, and from myself, Luqman Shadrack. Have a great evening. Assalamu alaikum.